I know you're out there. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
The Krisanne Hall Show.
Any varmint that crosses that lady's path has met its match. Come
on! Rise and shine, liberty-loving patriots. Welcome to the Krisanne Hall Show, where liberty is always above security, truth above personalities, and principle above party. William Pitt the Younger said in 1783, "Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants. It is the creed of slaves." And yet, we somehow knew that, or at least he did in 1783, and we have lost that understanding. It simply eludes us. We hear all the time the necessity of this infringement, the necessity of that infringement. We are watching this crisis now over Ebola, and now 5 airports are going to start screening for Ebola. How are they going to do that? They're going to require passengers to have their temperatures taken. They say travelers from West Africa will be taken aside at 5 airports to have their temperature taken and face questions about their health and possible exposure to Ebola. What exactly does taking your temperature tell you? Well, obviously, that's going to be determined to be an inaccurate test. And what's next then? Are they going to pull your blood? And let's not be all warm and fuzzy about this because it's just travelers from West Africa. How long before it becomes apparent that we have failed to screen everyone? And as the cases of Ebola continue to increase in the United States, how long before every passenger is randomly screened for temperature the way they randomly screen now in the airports? And how long before the hysteria over Ebola continues and we get screened with random checkpoints for our temperature? And then temperature will be determined to be inaccurate, and so now we have to randomly pull blood samples. You see, this is why we have to choose liberty. You're not going to stop this type of thing by increasing the government's power. How many terrorist actions have been thwarted by the NSA spying and issuing national security letters violating our Fourth Amendment and our First Amendment, by the way? This is the hidden victim of the national security letters that we don't actually see or talk about. You see, because these national security letters carry gag orders. If you're served with a national security letter, you can't tell anybody. In 2006, who was president in 2006? Oh, yeah, I forgot. George Bush. In 2006, the Government Accountability Office did an audit on these national security letters, these warrantless searches by the FBI, and found out that 49,000 national security letters were served. Now, national security letters are warrantless searches. They are searches based on arbitrary warrants issued by the FBI that has absolutely no court, no due process check. And I'm sorry, I don't count the foreign intelligence surveillance courts as part of that check, please, because they don't concern themselves with the Constitution. They concern themselves with national security. 49,000 national security letters issued in 1 year. 49,000 warrantless searches. The Government Accountability Office found out that 60% of those 49,000 national security letters were served on you and me, on citizens and legal resident aliens, people who are in this country legally. And now we're having to discuss this again. The legality of this. In 2006, they found out that there's a side warrant, a side provision called suspicious activity reports. And in 2006, this audit determined that 200,000 suspicious activity reports were served on banks alone. 200,000 suspicious activity warrantless searches on banks were served in 1 year alone, seizing almost 2 million bank records. But guess what? They all carry gag orders. So with odds like that, you probably know somebody who's had their bank records seized. But they will never know it because the bank can never tell them. And yet, we're discussing this again. Now, we've reached an economic crisis with the government's spying on us. All our technology people claim that the NSA's bulk surveillance programs are hurting the American economy. And they have a solution. A reform through Congress. You see, we're never going to get anywhere in this country as long as we're so blindly affected by economic challenges. Why aren't we outraged at the constitutional damages that are occurring because of NSA? No. We have to have Congress getting involved now because of the economic damages. This is what's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Now we get to go crazy because of the economic damages, and we're okay with the constitutional damages. Please tell me that we are not so shallow that this is our whole impetus for stopping spying. Oh, don't worry. We're not going to stop spying, according to Congress. We're going to reform our spying. Isn't that great? Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, says, when the actions of a foreign government threaten red, white, and blue jobs, Washington gets up at arms. But even today, almost no one in Washington is talking about how overly broad surveillance is hurting the U.S. economy. Yeah, because it's all about economics, isn't it? It's all about those fat dollars that feed your senators' pockets. Because if the economy is damaged, then the special interests can't fill their pockets, right? Here's a report from Bloomberg suggested that the NSA surveillance could cost the U.S. up to $180 billion in global technology sales by 2016. Another report said American companies could risk $35 billion a year if foreign customers decide to look elsewhere for similar services because the NSA is spying. First off, there's proof that the NSA is spying on every government, not just ours. So it's just ridiculous to claim that they're only spying on U.S. businesses. So what is What is Senator Wyden's plan? The U.S. Freedom Act bill. Yeah, that's awesome. The U.S. Freedom Act bill. We are going to not only have NSA spying, but if the USA Freedom Act bill passes, we will have congressional sanctioned spying. The USA Freedom Act would place metadata records. Listen to this. This is just absolutely insane. The USA Freedom Act would place metadata records, information like the time a call was made, the duration of the call, but don't worry, not the actual content of the call itself, in the possession of telephone companies instead of the NSA. And then if intelligence agencies want to gain access to that data, they would have to seek approval from, no, not your local court, not your state court, not any court of common law. They would have to seek approval from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court is built of attorneys who are focused on national security. That's their own definition. If you go look up the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court's definitions on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court website, they tell you that their primary focus is national security, not the Constitution. Do you think the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court is going to limit these agencies any more than their own arbitrary decisions? Of course not. But you know what? The biggest tragedy here is the fact that nothing will change except with the passing of this USA Freedom Act. Congress will now sanction this spying, further proving that there's not a single person in Congress who understands the Constitution or their obligation to defend liberty.
The Krisanne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist. Krisanne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
So now Congress wants to reform spying by passing a bill that would, and this is important to understand, that would legalize the NSA spying on us. Legalize. Do you understand that? Legalize. What the NSA is doing now is patently illegal. It is completely unconstitutional, but it is now patently illegal. Because the federal government is not legally able to do anything unless Congress passes a law to justify it. But now the NSA is illegally violating the Constitution. And with the passage of the USA Freedom Act, their illegal spying would become legal. It would not become constitutional, mind you, because we have become in the habit of allowing Congress to pass laws that are unconstitutional. But now they'll claim it's legal. And so the challenges of this NSA spying will become even more difficult because Congress will have passed a law that says, yes, we can spy on you. But don't worry. We're just going to be looking at the time the call was made and the duration of the call, not the actual content of the call itself. And don't worry, we're actually going to require court review, not by a common law court where you actually have rights and due process and habeas corpus. They're going to seek approval from foreign intelligence surveillance courts. Do you know what the Fourth Amendment says? The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects from unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Did you catch that? Shall not be violated. And then there are 5 conditions for a reasonable search and seizure. No warrant shall be issued without probable cause, without oath or affirmation, meaning a review by a common law court, a swearing of the necessity of the compliance with the Constitution before a court of common law, particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. The foreign intelligence surveillance courts, by their own admission, are not concerned about the Constitution. They're not concerned about compliance with the rights of the people. They're concerned about national security. So these foreign intelligence surveillance courts are no better than the NSA. But they're more dangerous because now people are going to think there's actually some review. If you're served with a warrant from the NSA or the FBI based on these NSA warrants, do you get to challenge that warrant in court? Pfft. Right. Keep dreaming. Because guess what? They carry gag orders. And you can't contact a lawyer. The gag order says you can't even contact a lawyer if they determine it to be a matter of national security. So how are you going to challenge this? Where's the due process? See, the real problem here is due process. And then the First Amendment, because there's a gag order. Lawyers are in federal court right now in a San Francisco courthouse talking about these NSA warrants. A U.S. district judge ruled that the FBI's use of these national security letters was a fundamental violation of the First Amendment, as well as separation of powers, not to mention the Fourth Amendment. And now they're appealing her ruling. But you see, the FBI says, we have to do this. It's a necessary tool to protect against international terrorism and clandestine intelligence activities. Well, that's why they have to spy on all of us, right? Because of international terrorism and clandestine activities. But these unilateral gag orders, this court said, is a violation of your First Amendment and your Fourth Amendment and your Sixth Amendment and your Fifth Amendments. I don't know why they don't talk about this stuff. But still, that doesn't stop the FBI saying it's necessary to keep you safe, declaring themselves tyrants and declaring us slaves.
The Krisanne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist. The Krisanne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
And so still discussing the NSA spying on us in this court case where they're appealing the judge's ruling that these national security letters are unconstitutional. Can you believe the arguments made by the FBI? You see, the ruling was that these national security letters, their gag orders, are a violation of our First Amendment. We're not talking about that very much, but the truth is, the gag orders that prevent you from speaking about a warrant are definitely a violation of your First Amendment. But not only that, your violation of your Sixth Amendment. your Fifth Amendment right of due process. But the Department of Justice argued, their lawyers argued, that if the FBI had to go through and justify every single gag order, they said the FBI would not be able to function if it had to look at every single national security letter and determine whether confidentiality had to stay. Are you catching that? Due process is too much trouble for us. We wouldn't be able to function if we had to actually follow the Constitution. You know what? If you have to circumvent the Constitution to do your job, you are a criminal. We need to understand that these national security gag letters they don't even require a court to review them. But the act that Congress wants, the Reform Act that Congress wants to pass, doesn't require a court either. Because the foreign intelligence surveillance courts are kangaroo courts built of lawyers who will work for the federal government, paid by the federal government, who will determine whether the federal government is acting in accordance with the national security needs and not in light of anything constitutional. It's just absolutely stunning to me that our government is so bold, so brazen in their arguments. I mean, how do we get to that point? How do we get to the point where the federal government is so bold in their transgressions of our Constitution that they don't even care what we have to say? I just wonder when we are going to be more concerned about the Constitution than we are economics. I mean, Congress wants to get involved now because businesses are losing money. When are they going to get involved when the Constitution is being destroyed? Well, that would mean that they'd actually have to stand up against a president's executive orders and an out-of-control executive agency. That would mean they'd actually have to defund the NSA. Because National Security Agency is unconstitutional. The federal government only has the ability to engage in foreign affairs. Oh, but that now bleeds into national security, right? Why? Well, only because the federal government isn't engaging in enforcement of immigration anymore. See how these things lead together, right? Our open borders actually empower the federal government's argument that they need to transgress our Constitution to keep us safe because they know open borders increases the existence of illegal immigrants in the United States who are terrorists. And since we have an inundation of illegal immigrants in the United States because of our open borders, then the government needs to focus on actually spying on us more. See, this open border thing is not about immigration. It's not about amnesty. It's about increasing the federal government's power by the claim of necessity. How does that work out for us? It doesn't. Well, while we're distracted by all this other stuff, right? While we're distracted by ISIS. While we're distracted by Ebola. It's Congress that's destroying our Constitution. It's Congress who is allowing open borders. It's Congress who's funding national security letters in the violation of our First Amendment, violation of our Fourth Amendment, our Fifth Amendment, our Sixth Amendments, violation of our Seventh Amendments, seizing our property without any due process. And we have to be okay with that because it's a matter of national security. The NSA says the gag order is not severable. We cannot operate these national security letters without a gag order. Well, okay then, NSA. If you cannot sever the gag order, then your national security letters must fail in their entirety. Because if you cannot allow us due process, an inherent right that has been codified since 1215, then you are not allowed to use them. Because remember, if you have to circumvent our liberty to do your job, then you are the criminal and not us. Well, there's another interesting report talking about reports by the government. Another interesting report from the CDC that has been issued, releasing the death statistics from 2010, show that Americans are 51 times more likely to die in an accidental poisoning than accidental shooting. Oh, where's our poison control legislation? Why aren't we marching on the streets to outlaw poisons? To regulate poisons out of our homes? Why don't we have to have a license to carry poisons? Why don't we have to have a license to house poisons in our houses? Why aren't we drilling our children in the schools to find out if their parents hold poisons? According to the CDC, the figures show that there were 600 accidental shooting deaths in 2010. Yet there were, I just want you to compare these numbers. 600 accidental shooting deaths in 2010. Yet there were 30,781 accidental poisoning deaths in the same year. There were 554 accidental shootings in 2009 versus 31,758 accidental poisoning deaths. I just want you to see this. That the CDC proves that Americans are approximately 10 times as likely to die from accidental suffocation versus accidental shooting, and almost 6 times more likely to die via accidental drowning, non-boat related, than accidental shooting. And yet, we have to spend millions of dollars running ads and conducting studies on the danger posed by accidental shootings in the United States. Advocacy groups everywhere telling us that we have to have gun control because of accidental shootings. You are 51 times more likely to die from an accidental poisoning than from an accidental shooting. And children under the age of 10 are more likely to die from accidental drowning or burning than accidental shooting, not according to the NRA, not according to the Gun Owners of America, but according to the CDC. What are we doing in our country? Hannah Winthrop in 1776 called it maddening on to our own destruction. Repeating the lies so that they will actually shape and conform us in a brainwashing effort to deny us our fundamental rights. I'll remind you that Eric Holder said that we must brainwash people into thinking differently about guns. Well, there you have it. You know what? I have a near cure for the accidental gun shootings. I'm not saying 100%, but I'm saying pretty close. a near cure to accidental shootings. Richard Henry Lee talked about it in their argument to ratify the Second Amendment. He said, whereas to preserve liberty, it's essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them. If we had training sessions for our young people on how to keep and bear arms, starting when they're young, accidental shootings would go down so dramatically. I mean, we're only having 600 a year, but they'll go down even more if we train our children how to keep and bear arms. Because you're fooling yourself if you think your guns being hidden are going to protect your children. Ever tried to hide something from a child? It doesn't work. They will find it. And if their only experience with firearms is through video games and television and movies, that is how accidents happen. And when we fail to teach our children, then we have adults who grow up who have no understanding of how to maintain a firearm. They turn 18 and think, oh, I need to go buy one because I'm a grown-up now. And that's how accidents happen. If we actually followed the wisdom of our framers, we wouldn't have an argument about our guns. And we'd be maintaining our Constitution.
The Krisanne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist. The Krisanne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
So I just want to point out some more liberal hypocrisy today, if that's okay with you. The fact that 600 accidental shootings in 2010, yet there were over 30,000 accidental poisonings in the same year. 51 times more likely to die from accidental poisoning than accidental shooting. And children under the age of 10 are more likely to die from accidental drowning or burning than accidental shooting. But we don't have any poison control legislation. We don't have any drowning control legislation. No, we have gun control legislation. Because it's all about lies. It's all about disarming you. You know, we don't have the Second Amendment to keep us safe from robbers and rapists or so we can go hunting or skeet shooting. I've said this before, and it's very, very true. Our framers did not codify the Second Amendment because they were afraid the deer and the rabbit would organize to disarm us so we couldn't hunt. They weren't afraid of gun collectors and sportsmen hoarding the guns to themselves so they could be the only ones that could win in tournaments. They were not afraid of the criminals organizing to disarm law-abiding citizens so only criminals could have guns. No. The right to keep and bear arms was to keep the government from enslaving us, from enforcing unconstitutional and unjust laws on us. Because, as Richard Henry Lee said, it's necessary to bear arms to preserve liberty. And Patrick Henry said it's necessary to overthrow tyrants. We bear arms to protect ourselves from the government. So why do we need the government's approval when they're the reason that we carry? It's all about disarming us. In 1641, they said that when the government disarms the people while it stays armed, that is part of a malignant and pernicious design to destroy liberty. Did you catch that? They defined that in 1641. Samuel Adams wrote in 1772, among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, life. First, life. Did you catch that? First, life. Secondly, liberty. Third, property. Together, number 4, with the right to protect and defend them in the best means possible. Did you know you have an inherent right to life, liberty, and property, and the protection of those? The final hypocrisy we're going to talk about today in the liberal world is that the New York court is about to decide whether chimpanzees have human rights. We are about to decide in a New York court whether chimpanzees have personhood or not. Now, I am not some kind of barbarian who thinks that we should treat chimpanzees inhumanely. But I want you to understand what's going on here. We are about to grant personhood to chimpanzees, and we do not grant personhood to human beings in the womb. If we believe that chimpanzees will eventually evolve into humans, and therefore they deserve personhood, how can we deny that a human life in the womb is not a person? Because it's going to be a person a whole lot sooner than a chimpanzee's evolution into human beings. How is that even a rational argument? We should be arguing for the humane treatment of chimpanzees, not establishing personhood. Personhood should belong to persons first, and we're not even willing to do that. Look, can we stop wallowing around and pooling our ignorance, please? Can we start thinking rationally and start defending the Constitution? That's all I ask. God bless. See you tomorrow.